Hey there, guys. Alright, today we are back with some more history matters, and this time we are talking about the Spanish American War Explained, a short animated documentary. We're not getting a question asked, so this must have been around the time maybe when they first started doing much shorter form content and not 10-minute history. I do not know. Because they obviously do not title their videos like this anymore. But before we dive in, make sure you go and check out the links in the description box below. I would love to join the Discord. Follow me over at Twitch, and please do go check out the gaming channel. My gaming channels here on YouTube. One is for stream VODs, and then the other is for edited content. Yabba yabba yabba. Yabba dabba doo. I don't know. With all that said, no more yapping. Let's dive in here. And let's talk about Teddy Roosevelt.
When William McKinley became the President of the United States in 1897, he presided over a country that was getting a
Angy country.
little bit upset. What was it upset about? Well, it was the island to its south, Cuba, which at this point was a Spanish colony, and was also rebelling against said Spanish rule. This rebellion kicked off in 1895 and had some pretty unfortunate timing. I mean, rebellions are always pretty badly timed for those being rebelled against, but it coincided with the spectacular rise in American nationalism. When these ideas were combined with the story
Do the Spanish eat babies? Probably. Congress continues to do nothing. Texas man loses hat. Cubans struggle for freedom. Does your wife want to vote? Brooklyn Divorce Lawyers Incorporated.
stories about Spanish cruelties in Cuba, the American people got upset. As such, the people in the press wanted to do something about it, but McKinley wasn't too keen. It wasn't until the Spanish ambassador's criticisms of McKinley were made public that he opted to send a warship, the USS Main, to Cuba in order to protect American interests. In February 1898, whilst in Havana Harbor, the Main exploded, and irrespective of what the cause of the explosion was, the American people wanted blood. So bad was the public fervour and pressure from opponent politicians that McKinley knew war couldn't be avoided. And so, on April the 21st,
I will always remember the USS Main because it was, if I'm remembering the class right, I believe it was I think my high school history, I think that was oh gosh. Was that our introduction to AP Euro? Or did we do that as a, world history, world history honors class? One of my first, I think it was World History Honors, which was for my time period. It changed like by the time I was a senior. By the time I was a senior, that class like no longer existed, or well, yeah, no longer existed. It had just become World History and then AP World History. But anyways, that's not important. For World History Honors, my freshman year of high school, my teacher gave us a thing on the Spanish American War. And she was like, all right, it was essentially like a deep dive right off the bat. She's like, here this is. Let's talk about propaganda and the warping of history and the things we need to look at when it comes to studying historical documents. Probably best intro to any history class I've ever gotten. Just because it was such a, I mean, that's so fucking good. It's so fucking, she's the best teacher I ever had. Anyways,
1890.
that's how I always remember the Main. I remember it back to that class where we read like it was like a couple newspapers regarding the sinking of the Main.
1898, America did just that and declared war on Spain under the slogan of "Remember the Main, to hell with Spain." Now, Spain knew it wasn't going to defeat the United States in a war, but chose to fight it anyway. Why? Well, there were two main reasons. The first was that Cuba, along with the also revolting Philippines, were the last major vestiges of the once glorious Spanish Empire.
Good
The
job.
second reason was that the dishonour of immediately surrendering to the US was too much for Spain to bear. Its leaders preferred to go down fighting and lose with its honour intact. So how did said fighting go? It went amazingly well for America. You see, America opted to fight
First time ever for the United States. We fought a war really well. Well, we did fight the Mexican-American War pretty well. Every other war, no.
the war on two fronts, one in the south in Cuba and one in the east, or to the west technically, in the Philippines. This was where Commodore George Dewey decisively defeated the Spanish fleet there at the Battle of Manila Bay. The US Army then landed and brought over the exiled Filipino revolutionary Emilio Aguinaldo, who promptly declared Filipino independence. To bring the Philippines back into the fold, the Spanish launched a major fleet hoping to dislodge the Americans. It was shortly after this that the US captured Guam, and by captured I mean they turned up and gave off a warning shot. Now traditionally, when nations were at peace, they would fire off a salute to each other. The Spanish garrison there didn't have any ammunition, and so the governor, who didn't know he was at war, promptly apologised for not returning the salute. The island was captured with no fighting. As for the Caribbean theatre, the US started by seizing some place in southern Cuba called Guantanamo Bay.
Never heard of it.
It later landed an expeditionary force here and pushed inland. The Spanish retreated but were extremely adept at defensive tactics, and so American progress was slow until the primary American force landed on July the 1st. This was the force that contained the famous Rough Riders Volunteer Army led by a certain Theodore Roosevelt.
Never heard of him.
The Americans advanced inland and fought a small Spanish force at the infamous Battle of San Juan Hill. Here, the Spanish were able to inflict many more casualties on the Americans than they themselves suffered before retreating. And in case you're wondering, it was this battle that made Theodore Roosevelt a household name.
Roosevelt leads the charge. Germany eyes Philippines. Does the Pope actually exist? War is still pretty one-sided.
July the 3rd saw the largest naval battle of the war, the Battle of Santiago de Cuba, during which the Americans obliterated the Spanish fleet there.
Nice.
It was after this that the aforementioned relief force that was being sent to the Philippines was promptly turned around because the Spanish coast now lay undefended. Puerto Rico was invaded in late July, but Spanish forces there were incredibly difficult to dislodge. By mid-August, the Americans had captured Santiago, the second largest city in Cuba, and in the Philippines the Spanish governor had surrendered as well. With their forces on the run and much of their navy sitting at the bottom of the ocean, the Spanish sued for peace before the Americans could march on Havana. In December, a peace treaty was signed in which Spain lost Guam,
we get Cuba, Philippines, Guam, everlasting glory. You get 20 mil, laughed.
Philippines and Puerto Rico to the United States. Cuba became a US protectorate until 1902 when it gained its independence. In conclusion, the war had gone exceptionally well for America, which is why the Secretary of State John Hay called it a splendid little war. America's naval prowess were made clear to the world, and not a great deal of soldiers died in combat. Of course, lots of soldiers died from disease, but since yellow fever didn't wear a Spanish uniform, they didn't count. And for Spain, the soldiers who fought on Cuba and the Philippines had shown themselves as being some of the best in the world. But of course, the shock to Spanish society for losing the colony of Cuba was absolutely massive. The Spanish Empire was dead, the American Empire was born. I hope you enjoyed this episode.
And that was the Spanish-American War Explained, a short animated documentary by History Matters. This was a good video. Can definitely tell it's one of their earlier ones. It didn't really have as much context as they are able to do these days in these shorter videos. So this is kind of more around the low end, I would say, for History Matters. Like, still good. There's still quality. It's just, you know, the things that some of the videos that History Matters has released are so fucking good that I think it's decent, but it's definitely nowhere close to their best work. And like, you can tell that it's one of the older short animated documentary videos, I feel like, because of the title and just like overall the kind of pacing and also some of the information said here. It didn't feel as like tight of a script as their newer videos, I feel like. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. I don't know. Overanalyzing. I don't know. I hope you guys enjoyed as well as I did. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe for more. And I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.